In today's video, we're going to look at one of the setups that we talked about last week in Wynn, and this was found both in my breakout session on, or last Tuesday, and then also by a friend of mine here on Twitter. And it was a beautiful two-step pattern setup, and you can actually go back to the video when we did it, which was, I believe it was last Friday, and it's in my free videos, or under the free video link. Anyway, bottom line is we hit and held support, and then we triggered an entry. We did see a beautiful rally in today's session, but guess what? It did start triggering pretty quickly, and I want to show you that first because a lot of people don't understand, again, the element of the trigger, where I talk about a trade setup and then waiting for a trigger that tells you that it's worth placing a bet. And then when you do see the trigger, you take the trade, and then you define your risk either underneath the low that's made prior to the buy signal, which would have been 92.67, or underneath the low end of the cluster, which would have been underneath 92.09. So as far as a swing trade entry, I typically tell people to look at either a 15-minute chart, which is the aggressive swing trade trigger chart, or a 30-minute chart, which is not quite as aggressive. And one of those is okay as far as triggering an entry for a swing trade. So in this case, you can see where we had tested the recent low. The trigger was when we did two things. First, when we had the 834 EMA crossover to the upside, and then you also want to look to the left and make sure that it shifted pattern. And what I mean by that is that it went from a pattern of lower lows and lower highs to higher highs and higher lows. So when you took out this prior swing, that was when, we made the first higher high. And when both of those things occurred, that was an entry signal, okay? So at that point, you could have gotten long Wynn, defined your risk underneath this low or underneath the cluster, and we're now seeing a beautiful rally off of that area. Now, it doesn't always work this way. There are plenty of setups that I provide that violate the zones, and if that happens, then you get stopped out. But typically you have some really good risk reward parameters on a lot of these because, for example, you might only be risking a couple of bucks to make 15 or 20. Okay, so the risk reward is good. Anyway, ultimately, if this plays out fully, which I don't know if it will or not, I know that it's up money at this moment, but if it plays out fully, the initial upside target comes in at 107.58. The secondary target comes in at 111.63.